What kind of results can you expect when you take feed out of the robot? Well, in part 2 of this special live episode from World Dairy Expo's Tanbark, brought to you by DeLaval, our panel of producers and advisors dig into the outcomes of robotic milking without feed incentives. You'll hear how data, cow behavior, and team performance have all improved, and why they're not looking back. If you missed part 1, go check out episode 282 for the full story behind their decision to go pellet-free in the box. That and more right here today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This episode is brought to you by DeLaval. As a company built on innovation, DeLaval is committed to finding ways to help dairy farmers do more with less by providing world-leading milking equipment and solutions. We've had a lot of conversation about the nutrition side, and there's more to address in the queue here, but I would also like to make sure we hit some other important topics that people are asking you questions on when it comes to really the transition into transitioning. For you, Matt, it was cows that were used to having pellet, and for you, Jay, it was stringing cows without the pellet from the get-go. So let's just walk through that a little bit. Matt and Kelli, can you lean into that transition process and what that looked like at Double Creek?
Yeah, so again, we knew that cows that were on pellet, you take it off, they don't want to go milk. They're expecting that pellet. So like we stated earlier, the initial idea was let's start with fresh heifers that don't have a pellet or new cow. I think eventually we started bringing in some second lactations that had never been on pellet and working those in. But the first step was just fresh heifers. The next step, once we saw that those cows were doing okay, was, well, can we lower the intakes, the pellet intake of the cows that are on it? I think we were about 6 pounds of pellet when we started, and we just started kind of, every couple months dialing that back a little bit, and eventually we got to where we're at. We still have 1 cow on pellet, so where we're at today with max ration of 1 pound per visit. That was kind of the last cutback we did, and so that worked for a while. But at some point, like Jodi said, you put too much grain in a bin and it's going to start lasting a long time, so we're not feeding very much. So it's kind of like, well, if I get this next load, it's going to last me all year. So we kind of got to the point where we need to make a decision whether we want to see this phase out organically, or do we start kind of cutting them out. And this is where there was a risk. Before I even put in robots, I had gone to a seminar in Las Vegas, and a dairyman, I think he was from Indiana, was talking about he had cows on robots, but he also had one of his dairies had calves that were fed in an automated feeder. And he said, well, those calves, they train better to the robots because they know that feed comes from a box. And so that always kind of stuck with me, and I kind of thought, well, if these cows remember 2 years ago that feed came from a box, if we start taking this away from them in the dry period, 60 days, they're going to remember 60 days later that there's feed there. I saw how good things were going for Jay. I kind of thought, well, let's just start cutting those off. And again, a load of pellet was going to last us a whole year. So let's just start bringing those off as they come fresh. And I will say that has been the biggest challenge, is those cows don't visit as much and they turn into more fetch cows. The ones that start out without pellet, they're perfectly fine. We have a lot of those that are now second and third lactations, and they go perfectly fine. But all those older cows that we have in the barn that are third plus that were on pellet that we've cut off, those are our fetch cows.
And so that addresses another question that we had here too, was related to how fetch cow, how that's changed with the adapting a new system. But Kelli, anything else to add on your end from really that transition phase that you worked to walk Matt through?
Yeah, slow and steady wins the race. And fortunately, Matt's probably one of the most patient yet progressive dairymen I ever got to work with. We were in it for the long game, not the sprint. So we were taking an addiction away from these girls. And we created an addiction by introducing them to these pellets. So we were then taking it away from them. So yeah, slowly and steadily, you just started bringing down the dispense rate first, where they didn't notice not as much was coming out. And I had our KPIs stayed, we monitored them, and then we started taking the max ration per visit down. But it was not overnight. It was easily, 6+ months?
Yeah, it was probably over a year long.
Yeah.
For over 2023 for sure.
Yeah, as we were bringing them up. And like Dash said, our biggest hypothesis or question was, will these girls remember through the dry period? And definitely older girls don't like change, and definitely apparently they have longer memories than we give them credit for. So anybody that's looking to wean off, obviously it's slow and steady. And now all of the California herds I work with that are in Robots guided flow, we've got them down from that 6-7 pound grade to 1.9 to 2 point, and they're happy there. Not everybody wants to be no feed, but we definitely don't need feed 7 to 8 pounds in a guidance.
Yeah, so this was the slow and steady transition over time, and really, Jay and Jodi, it was from the get-go transition, or it wasn't so much a transition, it was really a startup with this concept. So walk us through what that looked like. What was the plan as you started to bring those cows into the VMS barn, and what were some of the key factors that were important to you to make sure that you were setting yourselves up for success in that transition?
So with us, we worked with Kelli. So she actually was there at our startup and had some, and with the other DeLaval team, they were really good at beforehand, kind of making a plan. This is how things are, because it was all new to us. We had no clue how any of this was going to work. Make a plan, how many cows we're going to be bringing in, and then how training works. Set up a training program, and the biggie is have a good milking experience. That was the whole key. Have a good experience you have a good experience. It's all about the experience, and so training them, be calm, was very important. So no hot heads. I remember, Kelli, no hot heads around in the barns when we're training. So it was really about setting that up. And it sounds like, that's the same protocol that's set up for anybody with pellets. Same protocol we use. So, and we still do the same thing today. We brought up on Tuesdays, we brought up trained cows, and we use the same protocol. We bring them in, they're separate, and set them up with the same protocol in place, to put trim tails and put a date on them. So when they get out in the barn, we know who's new ones in the building, and kind of leave them as a group for a while. So when we started up, we started with 40 cows per robot. That was our startup. We did selection, so I had my daughter actually go through Jasmine, went through the whole conventional barn and scored all the cows based on teat placement, mobility, milking speed, and we gave that a number factor in dairy comp, and then had printed that off and picked out our best options for the robots, because that's the advantage we can. That was the thing that stuck with me, and it still does. I think about it, it's like, don't pay to fight the system. If she don't like it, just put her back to the parlor. Don't lose milk. So that's just because we can. So that's how that kind of criteria and what we did for getting started. That's kind of how we did things.
Kelli came along, and we kind of had this planner ahead, how walk these cows through the burr, so their first step, the day you want to milk them, isn't the first time they're exposed. And Kelli was kind of like, well, why do you want to train them into a routine that you're going to blow up in 3 days anyway? Why do you want to train these cows to walk through the parlor, and then all of a sudden, we want to stop? And it was kind of just like a point where you second guess, like, gosh, have we been approaching this a little bit raw?
The first 4, that's when we even walked them through robots, and then we were walking them to the parlor, and that's when Kelli's like, you were teaching them these habits. So they thought they were going to the parlor, and we were getting them used to that area, is what we thought. So they did seem to crowd to the end of the barn there because they thought they were going to leave to the parlor. And then we put them in the robots, and it didn't go too bad. It takes time no matter what, and it ain't going to be perfect. But then 2 weeks later, we're like, we don't need to do any of that. We did bring the younger ones for the second 4, but they went in unbelievably well. So we walked them in cold turkey. There had been springing heifers in the pen to get the pen dirtied up.
But we brought these in from the parlor, brought them in cold turkey, and put them in the robots, and way better. I mean, it wasn't that bad before. We had some that really gave us fit, but in the other one, there was like 1 out of 160 that was a problem. Otherwise, we were shocked how well they did. So they didn't need to be like getting trained, prepared. They were okay just going right off the bat, right in.
Kevin, if I can add to that, it is quite calmable, and the startup's always a stressful time. And then you throw into the fact that this is the first barn that's ever started up and never introduced their girls to an addiction. So the meltdowns were heavy from those that had been in startups. And I knew going into this, and I warned Jay going into this, as the sun came up wrong on Tuesday, it was going to be blamed on the fact that we were not giving a go crap in the robot. And I think Nat will agree too, through our journey, it's always the automatic fallback. In fact, we were at the farm yesterday out west and just talking KPIs. And his instinct is, well, if you turn on your pellets. So it is a scapegoat. But back to Jay's startup, we were training the girls to assist them and working with their natural instinct. And it was something different for those who had done startups. So the no pellet was not the contributory factor. It was simple animal behavior, which is they do what we teach them eventually, and then they do not like to be taught elsewise. So once we got over that with everybody's mentality, but every 15 minutes somebody was coming to you saying, we got to turn on these pellets. We got to hit Jay to order pellets. This is on. And it was no different. It was just we had created a habit in them that we had to break. So it's not for pellets.
Yeah, to echo that, we had 1 pen in our robot barn before we started up because we were overcrowded on the conventional dairy. We were running them through parlor. That pen was the worst to break to robots. I think that's what when me and Jay had that conversation about kicking them back to the parlor, because I said, man, 2 weeks in, I had 20 or 30 cows. I had to kick back to the parlor because that pen didn't break. That was our worst pen. The rest that it was all brand new, they went great.
And so for Matt and Jay particularly, how has no feed impacted body condition, rumination, repro, hoof health? Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of good cow health, because you're both cow guys. You're looking at those cows and you see it, and you also have systems where you can compare what it looked like in conventional to what it looks like in the VMS systems. What do you notice?
So when we started this, we did not have any activity monitoring system or anything like that. So I can't really address rumination or, lying time or anything like that, other than just, we saw the cows being cows, and some were up eating, some were laying, but we didn't really notice anything different there. Our repro definitely didn't suffer. Or we really didn't see a difference one way or the other. Lameness has never been a really an issue in the robot dairy, because they're not up and moving around as much. And
can you just add to that too, production and performance?
Yeah, so between 2023 and 2024, when we weaned this out, the pellet out, we saw an increase in energy corrected milk of about 3.5 pounds. As far as feed costs and things like that, we did not see the feed costs decrease like we thought. We thought, well, we're pulling this ingredient, so it's going to be cheaper. But what happened was, instead of eating their dry matter in the robot, they eat it at the bunk. So the feed costs did not decrease. But what we saw was the increase in feed efficiency. We went from a 1.5 feed efficiency up to like a 1.72. And then our static income over feed cost went up 81 cents from September of 23 to September of 24.
So significant findings that have come from that. And so for you, Jay, can you speak to that performance, productivity from both the cow health side all the way through to milk production and profitability?
So yes, similar to what Matt said, lameness wasn't very much of an issue before in the parlor, in the freestyle barn, in the robot barn. There's been no issues either. We run a foot bath on the opposite end of the robots. They pass through that 8 hours a day, every day, and then we swing a gate and they go through another lane pass through. So foot health in there has been really good. So not much issues on that. breeding's been very good. It was a little better even in the robots. Now they're pretty similar, but for a while there was really high on the robots. Otherwise, production-wise, once we got settled in and trained, the robots were always ahead of the parlor, probably by about 3 pounds. They always were ahead. I didn't see it as much this summer. It was interesting last summer. So we didn't have a lot of hot days. Where I'm at, not many days over 90. There's humidity. But last summer we had a couple days, and like I said, I didn't see it this summer, but the parlor dropped like 6 pounds, and in one of those stints, and we have sprinklers and tunnel fans, tunnel ventilation, and everything in there. And we don't have sprinklers in the robot barn, but they did not drop. The robot barn did not drop. I really feel like that holding area, there's a lot. It's just a lot going on there. It's just their time spent there. It's just so much heat. That's harder on maybe than we know, being that they're just in the robots. They're just spread around all the time. As far as butterfast components, currently we see we're running like 110 energy corrected in the robots. In the parlor, we're at 107. So what we've been seeing is we got a 4.2 butterfat with like 99 pounds in the robots, and the parlor's at 97 with the 4.0 butterfat. And I know with another consultant, Tim, that might be out here, that they work with, he's brought up that maybe that they're eating these smaller meals all day. Eating smaller meals versus coming back and slug feeding from the parlor, that we're maintaining this room pH and having a higher butterfat. And with a little higher level of protein, the last milk check, we seen 65 cents more a hundredweight out of the robot barn just based on components. So that's definitely a positive right there.
And Jodi, would you like to jump in on this one as well? Because you not only work with Jay, but as we said before, other robot herds in your area. And so just kind of in performance comparison, what do you see in his herd versus other robot herds that you work with that do continue to feed pellet?
Well, I think the one thing in our area, I think we work with a really, really strong network of dealers. So there's a lot of very successful robot farms in the area. But let's back this up a little bit and talk about Jay's conventional farm before they had the robots. Jay is a farm that, has earned its place probably in the top 10%. And that has followed through on the robot side of things as well. So it's consistency. It's a lot of things that are happening on the farm on a daily basis. But we'll have other customers, within our client base that will have these, 1 week to 2 week averages where maybe, they're ahead of Jay, like say, but ultimately when you look at these longer spurts of, quarters or months, Jay is outperforming a lot of other farms on energy corrected milk, on efficiency. So all things that I think they strive to well.
How do you believe this whole system really impacts the long-term feed costs and structure that you're looking at with these dairies?
Well, I guess like you talked about, we're not putting feed in the robot that we don't captive. Because even if you're going to go with like a boopy pellet or a formulated pellet that used to have a lot of soy hulls or wheat mints, at some point, those are all just unnecessary actives. So we don't have that. So I guess just the longer you take that equation out, right, the more days that you consider the feed cost savings, the greater the impact.
Yes. And Kelli?
I can add to that because this is another question I get asked. This isn't obviously for everyone. And as I get called upon more to be on more farms in North America, I realize we have a luxury that not a lot of guys have. You might be in a geographic area where you can't put up the high quality forages. You can't, put up the highly digestible forages and capture that rate of passage in your girls. We have the luxury of having 10, 15, 20 commodity dates, and we can buy rail cars to bring ingredients. But there are some areas where they have to put that nutrition into a pellet, which used to feed it to their robots. So it's not for everybody. You have to be able to have the feed area and the system to sustain it.
And Kelli, let's build off of that with your expertise and also the rest of our panel up here today. What does it take from those management details to really set up a no feed no pellet system for success? What are the things that absolutely have to be right on the management side for this to work?
We need to have cows that can walk, cows that can move. So whether that's just good help, barn design, layout, accessibility to feed, accessibility to water, and accessibility to robots. Sometimes, unfortunately, you get one chance to do it right. Otherwise, you're talking about jackhammers and lots of expensive things to fix those mistakes.
You have to be a guided or a modified guided barn. Bare bones minimum. We're working with the cow's natural instinct to seek out feed and water. So a guided or a modified guided barn. We're driving the girls to that high quality TMR in the bunk. We have to have a solid boot camp training program, like Jane talked about. We have to get these girls taught to the system in a calm, cool, collected, efficient way, and then let them to live their best life. And then obviously you've got to have the commitment with your team, the nutritionists, the farmers, anybody else on the advisory group.
I also think you gotta keep up your maintenance on the robots. If the robots can't perform, doesn't matter whether you got grain in there or not, it's not gonna work. But a few of the questions we got along the way was, what if you got more incompletes or cows because they're not getting pellets, so they can't kick the machine off, and obviously we didn't see that. My answer to that was, well, we're taking machines off in the parlor, no, so I don't think that's an issue. But if you're not taking care of your machines, the first thing people are going to look at when they call up your data is, well, your incompletes are high. Well, yeah, my guy's behind on maintenance or whatever. So the machine has to work to be able to harvest the milk, and you got to stay up on your maintenance on those robots.
I know when we were starting up, many of the people that were helping just never said how calm the cows were. So, I mean, that's a big factor because that's the thing that was talked about. To think that, the pellets that they got to eat to keep them calm in there and settle in there so they don't kick. And we just don't see that. They just walk in there and they just stand in there and chew their cud. I just chuckle every time I watch them. They just hop on in there. I'm in here be a little Jersey and she just jumps in there and she got all the room in the world, but she just stands there and chews her cud. She's just happy to be there. So we're learning about the milking process. That's what they're really, that's what we're teaching them, is the milking process.
And, we've been able to hit a lot of different angles of this topic with you four up here today, our two dairy farmers and also their key advisors sticking by their sides. But looking at our queue here, a lot of these questions really are related to nutrition and rations and what it really takes to make it all work. And so a question I have for you, you mentioned that you feed the same ration. Could you explain what the ration is based on and which factors you take into accounting when formulating?
Well, I mean, the biggest starting points, I guess, was feedback on making sure that we're dialed in on dry matter intakes. There is a slight dry matter intake difference between the two farms. But essentially, we're taking into account their homegrown gorges and sampling feed, because that is making up a majority of the diet. And then just, balancing around the carbohydrates and the digestibility that we have and targeting high component out yield.
One thing that's a little bit more specific as we get over to Kelli and Matt here also really pertains to changes that had to be made. Did you have to do some different balancing during that period of time of weaning off the pellets?
No, we didn't have to do anything. Like I said, our pellet was just a flavor. It had little to no impact on the ration. And again, that's why it made ideal sense for us. We don't have a mineral or we don't have a specific fat level or anything in that pellet. You let them fill up on this pellet that was just a bait to get them to go there. They're not going to go to the bunk and get the stuff that makes them milk.
And I have to, repeat this over and over again. We were told when we started these journeys just a feed lady that got sucked into robots, we were told we had to feed pellets in a robot. We were told we had to bait our girls to the robot. And I remember getting on the phone with Matt and his nutritionist, Mike, and I asked the same question to Jim and Jodi, can you give us everything in the TMR? And both of these nutritionists immediately told us, irony out, your pellet's just a stiller, or we're already planning on feeding everything in, and we're just going to put this skeleton occupier, for lack of the word, because we were told we had to have pellets.
One thing that they had, I had the DeLaval team set up so we could monitor cows how long they were in a commitment pen. Because I'm like, to me, that was like, okay, how are we doing compared to others with pellets? Are they sitting in there too long? And we averaged, when they first started, I think we were at 30 minutes. Now we're like, the other day I looked, it was 26 minutes. So that's the average time a cow spends in the commitment pen per day. The average per cow per day is 26 minutes in the commitment pen. So, I mean, compared to our conventional, I mean, there's some that are sitting in the holding area probably 3 hours a day, 3 times a day milking. So they're moving through there. We're getting our milkings. So that was the factor there, is that the cows are showing it's working. And the funny thing is, because we have monitors on the parlor and in the robots for rumination and activity and all that, they're within 2 minutes of eating time. It's 5 hours and 13 minutes of eating time a day spent in the parlor, and in the robots, it's 5 hours and 11 minutes. It's within 2 minutes of eating time, which is totally just kind of blows my mind. So, but they don't have that time spent in the holding area, so that's more of me time, let's say, for them. That was the goal. I mean, that was the goal of it. But it's just neat to see. So they got more time for themselves to rest and make milk.
And, there's another question in here specifically for Jodi and Jay. What's the dry matter intake difference between the two bars?
I think right now, we're sitting at maybe like 1.5 pounds difference. Dry matter intake.
And another question from our audience here, and this is really related to that cow behavior. Do you see better behaved cows in the robot because they aren't getting angry at the end of milking when they have already finished their grain? So just, I think, speak in general to cow behavior. And I know, Jay, when I was out at your place and just observing this system in action, one of the things we talked about was people are curious, well, what does the cow do in the robot if there's no feed? So,
yeah, it's fun to watch them. They just stand in there chewing their cud and just getting milked, just like they do in the parlor. That's been my thing so we've been in our parlor for 26 years. That's the thing before I'd leave. Like every day I'd just sneak up by the parlor and I'd look up there and see what they're doing. If there's cows standing there chewing their cud, they're happy. They're content. That was really like my little fast pass, how to see how everything's going, because they pick up on stress. They don't like noises and they don't like stress. And it's the same now in the robot. They're just standing there chewing their cud, and then they leave. They just kind of hang around and do their thing and just live their day.
That term angry cow kind of struck me. The only time we had angry cows in the robots was when we had pellets, and the cow would stay in the robot and continue eating once it was done. The cow behind her was angry, trying to get her out. And we also had pellets. The robots got this little flapper up top to kind of tell her, hey, you got to get out of here. When there was pellets in there, that flapper didn't do a dang thing. Those cows just kept eating and kept staying there, and then the cow behind her have to come push her out. We don't really see that anymore. The robot opens up, the cow leads, and she heads directly for the exit gate and goes to get that feed and water. To add to what Jay said, we don't see cows hanging out in the commitment pen. They get into the robot, they milk, they leave.
We did have to they did put the puffer on, so that would kind of move them out, because they would just stay standing in there, not long. But they just stay in there sometimes. I mean, they're happy. They were at, and so I mean, that just shows they're just happy to be there. They're comfortable, and move along. So there'd be one behind her that kind of nudges her in the butt sometimes. Doesn't happen often, but I mean, they do just stay standing in there.
And a couple of questions in our queue also here related to guided flow versus free flow and how a system like no feed works. So lean into that, if you will. The no feed concept, guided flow versus free flow. What do we need to know about that?
Well, like I said, when Jay mentioned that they were going to move forward with development pellets, I was very excited. I feel that I was working for a producer on a free flow system that was either a startup or existence, and came to me and said, we really want to eliminate the feed, at the robot. I think I would have a little bit of anxiety or, Delicate can try to steer them away from that, just because of fear of failure. I guess to an extent, if there's a will, there's a way, and if someone wants to navigate that and try to do it, I'll be all ears, but I definitely don't want to be steering that ship, I guess. That would be my opinion on it.
And as we get into our final minutes of the session that we have with you here today, DeLaval has brought this conversation to the stage and to share with a broader audience. And what we haven't really touched on is how the folks from the DeLaval team have supported and been there to walk alongside you, not just of hers using VMS, but as her trying something new, going through a change. Can you just lean into what that has looked like and what support from the DeLaval team has been to help you explore what was a new territory, but has now become an adopted practice at both of your farms?
I think it was mixed. I think there was some people in DeLaval that were very hesitant, that and rightfully so. They got a product out there that they want to see be successful, and but there was also another portion of the team that embraced it really well. And there was particularly Nikki's side really helped us dive into our data. She could pull out a lot of the data to show us that hey, you're not slipping in these areas. Oh, like Kelli said earlier, it's always the fallback. Oh, well, you got a problem, turn on the pellets. Well, that's everyone's first answer. But when you really dive into the data, you can sit there and go, well, no, that's not caused by this, that's caused by that. And I got the luxury of a conventional herd right across the driveway to say, well, our milk slipped by 2 pounds, but it did on the conventional dairy too, right? So there, we were able to do that. But we definitely had, Nikki really was able to pull the data out for us and do a really good job.
Our deal is very supportive. They're very progressive. I think they got over 100 robots in the territory that they cover, and they're very innovative. That's the biggie. So they're all thought too. This will work. Why not? Why won't it? So they were very supportive, and laying out a plan on how to get going. DeLaval was really good with preparing us. Same with what Matt said, the data, getting the data out of it. They've been really good. So we're seeing 2.8 by milkings, incompletes 3.5%. Just really good numbers. And from the service guys, so I don't know what it's like to have pellets. So I don't see it. The service guys, when they come out, they just can't get over how clean everything is. Our robots are just spotless clean.
And Jay, I've been to your place and I noticed the same thing. So I thought, well, man, either when Jay's hiding in the barn here, in the robot barn, he's got a dust cloth and he's polishing everything up, or this is a result of, as you said, just not having that extra particle accumulation in the air. And when we really step back and take a look, and just to wrap up with some final thoughts here that I'd like to have each of you share, I want to direct specifically to Matt and Jay. Matt, you first. When you really look at the no-feed system that you have incorporated at your dairy, what do you believe are your biggest wins?
Definitely getting more feed efficient. Feed is our largest cost on the dairy by far. And when we started this and we started looking at it in the end of 2022 and early in 2023, we were going through extremely high feed prices. And so that was, again, the other driving factor was, it was a negative year profit wise, right? And we're kind of we got to do every little penny we can. And, my thinking was, let's start with our highest cost. Is there any way we can reduce that? And that's, again, where this kind of stemmed from was, well, can we lower our feed costs? And again, it didn't necessarily turn out that way, but we got more feed efficient. We were utilizing our highest costs more efficiently, and that's been our biggest win.
Thank you for sharing that. Jay,
so
win?
I guess as I alluded to it already, it's just that not knowing how to deal with feed system. We don't need to spend any time on any of that, because when we toured lots of farms, there's many of them right in our local area there. They all said it. When the bin runs empty, somehow all of them in the barn know it. And we didn't have to experience that or deal with with any of that part, ordering feed, keeping up on it, maintaining any of that. And also what Matt said, I mean, the feed costs, of course, like the Jodi had said, I mean, so we're replacing that. If it was corn gluten pellets, it's just forage is replacing it. Forage has a value. It's not like it's nothing. So it does have a value, but we did still figure it was about probably $50,000 a year of savings. That's the number we kind of come up with, that without feeding any pellet of any sort. That was kind of what the number we had there. Okay, that's that. Let's see how the cows perform. And then they've been just doing great.
Jodi, you're probably going to have more producers coming to you with an interest as they see Jay's success with no feed. And so if they were to come to you and say, I'd like to do what Jay's doing, and I'd really love to have the same results, what's the most important message that you would share with that producer if they came to you with that interest?
I think we go back to just really focusing on forage quality. You know, getting the right kind of feed put up for the cows at the right moisture, packing, covering, etc. You know, good hygiene. That's going to be, I think, truly the biggest factor in success or not success. But then also having the right cows. You know.
And Kelli, it only makes sense to bring this conversation back to close out with you as the originator of this concept, from when you're out feeding your black cows in the field one day and bringing it to the barns of Matt's Dairy at Double Creek, Jay's up there at Heeg Dairy. Kelli, if you could summarize in our final minutes here, what are the 3 or 4 most important things that you want to drive home of what it takes for this no-feed system to be successful with a dairy farm?
It's not for everybody. So I would say guided or modified guided system is a must. Everything a girl needs to be in the bunk, in the TMR. And it has to be a highly digestible quality TMR. And again, like I said earlier, there are geographic areas. I get pictures from my counterparts all the time. There are areas that just do not have the luxury of putting up the quality of foragers that we do. Boot camp. That's my mountain, the diet is trading cows as creatures that have it. We start them young and we train them early. They figure it out. We don't need to hold their hands. And then the farm commitment. You have to be in the right headspace to accept this. Change is scary. We all know that. But progressive dairymen like us that are willing to open their mind with their advisors and think about what we're asking our girls to do in our robotic facilities, it just makes sense.
That's right. And with that, what a wonderful way to wrap up this conversation today here on the Tanbark at World Dairy Expo with these 2 dairy producers, Matt Strickland from Double Creek in California, Jay Heeg from Heeg Dairy up there in Colby, Wisconsin, and the advisors who sit by their side to guide them and be their right hands in so many of these conversations, Jodi Erickson from Pure Production Egg, and also Kelli Hutchings from Kelli's Egg Service out there in Colorado. And so please join me in giving them a big thank you for sharing their time, their stories, and their talents today on behalf of our friends at DeLaval and here at World Dairy Expo on the Tanbark. You just heard from a powerhouse panel of dairy leaders pushing the boundaries of what's possible in robotic milking. Thanks to DeLaval for bringing this conversation to the World Dairy Expo Tanbark and for you to tune in. Don't forget to follow, rate, and share this episode of Uplevel Dairy Podcast. I'm your host, Peggy Coffeen, and until next time, keep on growing, keep on learning, and up-leveling your dairy. This episode is brought to you by DeLaval. As a company built on innovation, DeLaval is committed to finding ways to help dairy farmers do more with less by providing world-leading milking equipment and solutions.